they're going to cut back on them. And of course, they've told you that too. Why? And now you have to look at the finances of American railroads. It turns out that American railroads can't make enough money to make it worthwhile to do their business. And let me spell it out for you very accurately. During the period from 1966 to the present, the working capital of U.S. railroads, which for years ran at $600 million, dropped off to $21 million. They had used up the cash that they had available in 1966. Now, what did they do with it? And what did they have to do with it? Well, for one thing, we are told by the Association of American Railroads that something like $3 billion a year is needed for improvements. As you know, the railroads are in bad shape. The rate of accidents has doubled in the last 10 years on the railroads. That is, accidents per mile carried, whereas traffic has only gone up 15%. And so we all know the railroads haven't spent enough money to improve. What they've spent is about $1 billion a year on improvements when they themselves say they should be spending $3 billion. So they haven't been spending it on improvements. They have increased wages, but the most important thing that they've done is that during this period, when the working capital was essentially taken down to zero, they paid out $3.2 billion in dividends. Now, what does that mean? It means that they maintained the rate of profit of the railroads at the expense of the ability of the railroads to operate. You know how the Pensacola went bankrupt? It took its cash and invested it in an airline, in a pipeline, and in various real estate. It did everything but run the railroad. And many of the railroads of the country are investing in hotels, in wine companies in California. Now why? Well, the answer is very simple. The new investments are more profitable. This is what's known as diversification. You diversify in the direction of profit. And the conclusion that I come to, just from analyzing these figures, is very simple. That running a railroad to do its efficient job of efficiently using fuel to carry people and freight is not very profitable. How do we know that? Because the nationalized railroads do that. They carry freight and people, and they don't make a good profit. The profit is below that of the bank interest rate. So we have an experiment done all over the world which says that for some reason, railroads are not as profitable as wineries and airlines and oil pipelines and hotels. Okay. What has happened in this country, it seems to me, and I'm not telling you about the effect it's had on your business because you know that better than I do. You know that your railheads are disappearing, that you have to get bigger trucks in order to carry the grain further, and that incidentally, that most of the bridges on rural roads won't carry the big trucks that you will need to replace railroad cars. I'm not telling you that. The point is that the railroads have decreased their ability to operate for the very simple reason that it is more profitable to do something else with the capital than run railroads. And the simple fact of the matter is that the railroads are unable to do their job, which I would define the way you define your job, which is to produce food. Well, the railroad's job is to produce transportation, and they're not doing it because it doesn't pay them. And what you've got is a clear conflict between duty to the country and duty to themselves. And they have inevitably chosen the direction of duty to themselves rather than duty to the country. And I see no way out. If we are going to imagine, we know that fuel will eventually be in short supply. How can we possibly run the country when the most efficient way to convert fuel into movement is being destroyed? Mind you, when those branch tracks are taken away in urban areas, the real estaters will come in and buy it up, and then 10 years from now, we suddenly discover, brilliant discovery, trucks are not an efficient way of carrying freight. We have to have railroads. Then they'll have $100 billion worth of real estate in the way of the right-of-way, because the bill allows the right-of-ways to be dispersed. So I see no way out here. that what is happening is that the railroad people have chosen to serve their own economic needs rather than your needs and the needs of the rest of the country. We can't live without the railroads, and I see no way out, if we are going to survive, and we will, short of having the railroads run, owned, and operated by the people of the country to serve the people. Now that's an old story, but let me tell you something even more surprising. Let's turn around now and look at the petrochemical industry. This is the industry that takes oil out of the ground, converts it into fuel, and into what else? Fertilizer. Nitrogen fertilizer is made from natural gas. Do you realize that most of the energy required to raise corn in the United States goes into the fertilizer? A corn farmer in Illinois uses considerably more energy for his fertilizer than he does for his tractors. A cotton farmer uses considerably more energy for the pesticides because they are also made from petroleum than he does for his tractor. So we have the petrochemical industry, which takes oil, converts some of it into heating fuel, some of it into gasoline, and an awful lot of it into fertilizer, pesticides, propane, and so on. And what else? Synthetic shirts made from petroleum, detergents made from petroleum. And what's more, well, let me just give you some quick figures. We've now computed how much energy it takes to make a pound of cotton and a pound of nylon. And here, the computation for cotton includes all the energy for the fuel in the tractor, the energy required to make the fertilizer and the pesticides. We've even included the energy involved in running the farmer's telephone. Okay? And it still comes out that it takes half as much energy to produce a pound of cotton as a pound of nylon. Now, I don't know what you want out of a shirt, but frankly, I'm much happier wearing a cotton shirt than a nylon one, or any synthetic one. I've chosen nylon because we have the numbers. In other words, we have raised the energy price of clothes because we have switched from cotton and wool and linen to synthetics. And we are burning up an irreplaceable source of energy, petroleum, when the cotton plant gets it from the sun. You know, nowadays everybody talks about solar energy and they say, oh, it's a terrible, difficult technical job. How can we capture solar energy? The cotton plant is sitting there quietly doing it all the time because it takes energy to make cotton. And so in our brilliance, we are rapidly wiping out cotton production and wool and flax production and going over to what? To making it out of petroleum. And whereas the cotton plant does this at low temperature, you've never seen a cotton plant like Moses's bush burning all by itself. But you go to a synthetics plant and they've got to run at 700 degrees temperature, 1,000 degrees temperature. So not only are they using petroleum to make the stuff, they're burning petroleum in order to make it. And when they burn petroleum, they pollute the air. Let me tell you something. The chemical industry, which is now largely involved in making synthetics, puts more water pollution into surface rivers and lakes than all the cities of the country put together. And it burns 1/3 of all the fuel used in manufacturing industries in the United States. And it produces about 1/10 the number of jobs per unit of fuel burned, and it produces about 1/5 of the economic gain, so-called value added. In other words, if you divide the economic gain of an industry, value added, by the amount of energy burned, that's the efficiency with which energy is converted into economic gain. For all manufacturing industries, that's about $18,000 per billion BTU of fuel. The chemical industry can only produce about $7,000 per billion BTU of fuel. In other words, it's an industry which uses fuel inefficiently, creates few jobs, and instead of, and drives natural materials like cotton and wool and flax off the market, making us more and more dependent on a wasteful way of putting a shirt on our back. And the same thing is true of detergents. 80% of the cleaner market in the United States has been taken over from soap by detergents since World War II. Detergents are made out of petroleum, whereas they used to be made out of, soap used to be made out of byproducts. And again, you have to burn, pollute the air, and you know how polluting detergents have become. So what has happened here is that a whole industry has been built up which replaces farm products and does much less efficiently what the farm used to do. Now, the most ironic and telling thing about it is that the same industry has now got you at their mercy with respect to your supplies of energy. And let me explain that. Let me explain the propane situation. Why has the price of propane tripled? Well, everyone says, how can it be? Because propane isn't much of the energy's fuel supply, and it isn't. It's less than 1%. But you depend on it. 50% of the propane in this country is burned in rural areas for homes and for drying grain. Well, why is that? The answer is that 25% of the propane in this country goes into the petrochemical industry. What's it used for? It's making synthetic fibers. In other words, it's used making the goods that compete with farm goods. All right. All you've got is a situation. You're over here needing propane, and a pretty heavy competitor is over here wanting propane to make a competitive bid against you. But over here, thousands of individual farmers, and over here, the petrochemical industry, about $50 billion industry. And if you look at the prices that they're ready to pay propane, you will find they have escalated. Because, in fact, there is now, well known, at first there was a gray market in petrochemicals. Now there's a black market in petrochemicals. And a month ago, Mr. Nixon, in his wisdom, decided to control petrochemicals. Everybody go, well, what of it? What that will do is to enable heavy financial force, the petrochemical industry, to compete very effectively with you for propane by raising the price of propane. And the ironic thing is that they will make out of the propane stuff that will put the Texas farmer out of work. And this, again, is what is it? You said, Mike, why are all these stupid things being done? Well, it's the same story as arrows. It is far more profitable, something like tenfold, to convert propane into fiber than it is to burn it. You see, you get chemical engineers. It's a very interesting situation. Petrochemicals are flow systems, and you always get byproducts. And the question is, what are the byproducts? Now, almost any petrochemical byproduct can be burned. And in the days, it would be burned as a flare. Flares you sometimes see at batteries, but nowadays they're used as heat. And you can sell a byproduct from almost any refinery byproduct can be sold as fuel. If you can convert the byproduct into a synthetic fiber or plastic, you can get a price up to 10 times the price that you can get if it's a fuel. The result is that there is always a tendency to set up an expensive market to compete with the fuel use of a petrochemical and push it in the direction of a synthetic, which is your competitor. And the answer is very simple. The reason why we're having shortages of propane and enormously high prices is that it pays the petrochemical industry, which has, and the big